So this is the Spadger Board S900. Chances are you've never heard of Spadger before, and at first glance it may seem like another budget electric skateboard company coming out of China. While you might not necessarily be wrong, the Spadger Board has some unique features that sets itself apart in the highly competitive market of budget electric skateboards. As a disclaimer, Spadger did reach out to me and sent me this board for free for review. However, I'm still going to try to do my best to give you a true and objective review of this board based on my experiences with it. Prior to Spadger reaching out, I actually did meet the original designer of the board over on Instagram, so I'd actually known about the board for a little while and thought it looked pretty cool. So when I finally received the board earlier last month, after maybe a little bit over a week of waiting, I was actually pretty excited to unbox and try it out. Despite the box arriving in questionable condition, the contents in the box were actually fine, and the rest of the unboxing experience was pretty standard. The box came with the board, the remote, chargers for both of these, a skate tool, and an instruction manual. So in regards to board aesthetics, right off the bat you'll see why the Spadger board is a lot different than its competitors, that being its unique deck and integrated RGB LEDs. Initially, it might seem like the deck is very stiff, but in fact, it's very much the opposite. The deck is made up of some sort of composite polycarbonate material that makes it both extremely flexible and durable. It's also translucent, allowing its integrated LEDs to really shine and show itself off. It's important to note that to turn on and off the LEDs on the board, you have to hold down the reverse button on the remote for a few seconds. I actually couldn't find these instructions anywhere on the manual, so I had to figure it out myself. The instruction manual directs you to an app on your phone, and on here you can actually customize your LEDs to many different configurations and colors. The app uses Bluetooth to find lights, however I did have some occasional trouble connecting the lights to my app, but it usually was solved after some combination of turning on and off my board or my phone's Bluetooth or just restarting the app. With the app you're able to customize the pattern and the colors of the LEDs and even set it to react to certain sound or music. And if it wasn't obvious at this point, my favorite setting is purple. Let me know in the comments what color you'd end up picking if you did have this board. Going back to talk about the deck, I weigh about 120 pounds, so I'm pretty light, and there are times that even I feel that this deck can be too flexy. With this deck, I think foot positioning is super important, or else you might feel too much flex, especially if you're heavier. I found that the flex in this deck is actually more flexier, or slightly more flexier than the Boosted Board V2. So when it comes to foot positioning, I usually prefer to have my front foot basically over the front truck and my back foot sort of in front but not over the rear trucks. I find that this stance reduces the flex on the deck and lessens the strain on the rear hub motors. If you do prefer the flex, you can always readjust your feet so your stance is more centered, but do be wary at high speeds when it gets too flexy. Although don't get me wrong, I like flexy boards and it contributes to ride comfort. You just have to really be aware of how flexy the deck is and adjust accordingly. The deck also features handle cutouts, which I've grown to like on electric boards. Despite these handles being a little bit sharp on the edges, since electric boards are so heavy, the Spadger board being specifically 18 pounds, having these handles can go a long way when it comes to portability. The design of the grip tape is also very nice and minimalist. However, for some reason it did seem to be installed off-center on mine, and it covered the access to my truck's hardware. I originally wanted to install some shred lights, but refrained from doing so since I didn't actually want to cut through the grip tape at the time. The Spadger board's unique deck and integrated lighting system are really its main features that make it stand out. If you're buying a Spadger board, it's most likely because these features stood out to you, but that doesn't mean the rest of the board is bad. So when I say that, I mean in regards to its performance as an electric skateboard. It's not bad, but it's not perfect either. I think it's on par as to what you'd expect from a hub motor board in this budget price range, which is around $470 by the way. The board's top speed is standard for many e-skates at 22 miles per hour. Through my testing, I did confirm that 22 miles per hour is accurate for its top speed. The range, on the other hand, unfortunately heavily underperforms compared to its advertised 15 miles range. I conducted a range test on a windy 50-degree Fahrenheit day, and I was only able to get 7.5 miles out of it before it completely died. On a nicer day where it was more warm, I could probably only expect up to a 10% or so increase in range, which still wouldn't be anywhere near the 15-mile advertised range. To be fair, honestly, I did not expect this board to achieve the full 15-mile range either. In this price range, I think it's often hard to find a board that ships with a high-quality battery by default that really allows a true 12 to 15-mile range in real-world conditions. So as expected, the battery installed on the Spadger board isn't one of those high quality ones, so it does result in, its actual true range of probably around 6 to 8 miles or so. On that same note, expect voltage sag as your battery level drains, which will affect your acceleration and braking power as well as your top speed as you use your battery. In other words, when you're riding, you should really consider being close to home or your destination by the time your battery shows about 1 to 2 bars out of the 4 battery indicators. Because if your battery dies, you might be stranded having to wait up to 2 to 3 hours for your battery to fully charge. However, if you do pay attention to your trip distance and your battery level, you should really have no problem, as long as you consider this board to be a 6 to 8 mile range board. So when it comes to control and ride experience on this board, I think it's very similar to the MEEPO board, probably much closer to the V2 variant. I don't know the exact specific hardware that the Spadger board uses, but the enclosures are the same as the MEEPO, as is the remote, and I can only assume that the ESC is the same or very similar to the MEEPO V2 ESC, considering they do use the same exact remote. So this can be a good thing if you like the MEEPO ESC. If you've never tried a MEEPO, the control experience is more or less very smooth and controllable throughout, besides the initial acceleration or hard braking, which can feel jerky at first on the high speed mode if you're not careful. The throttle also seems to accelerate and brake in intervals, which you might feel if you're really paying attention. But after my first day with it, I really had no problem with the control. And if you do still have a problem with it, the third speed setting smoothens the acceleration curve even more, preventing any jerky initial acceleration while still allowing you to reach its full top speed. The remote itself is nice. I've been a fan of this MEEPO V2 style remote for a while. In fact, I've actually used one on my Riptide for a while. It uses a wheel to control the throttle, but I've noticed that the Spadger board doesn't fully utilize the full distance of the wheel. I seemingly reach top speed way before the wheel of the remote actually reaches its max point. Otherwise, it has the standard power button, reverse switch, and micro USB charging. Also, like I mentioned earlier, holding down the reverse button will switch on and off the LEDs of the Spadger board. Speaking of things I mentioned earlier, the deck again makes the ride experience interesting. Since it is flexy, you might have to readjust your stance on this deck to find what's right for you. The heavier you are, the more you'll likely be affected by the flex. The flex does help with absorbing vibrations on the road, and the large 97mm wheels also help in this regard. However, since this is a hub motor board, the rear wheels will have decreased urethane compared to front full urethane wheels, so you'll feel a lot more vibrations back there. The rear wheels might also wear down a lot faster, but the urethane caps are allegedly replaceable, so even if they do wear down, you can always buy replacements. So there is this one issue that I consistently run into whenever I ride the Spadger board that I had to learn to adapt to. The Spadger board seems to perform very poorly when riding over rough terrain or pebbles. Now, I'm not exactly too sure if this is an issue with the wheels or hub motor specifically or the software of this board, but there are many times whenever I ran over pebbles, it felt like I had these micro disconnections between the connection of my remote and the board, and it did feel kind of off-putting. And they were really tiny, I could still ride, but yeah, it felt weird. Riding over rough terrain in general just felt sketchy also. It felt like sometimes I might get thrown off at any time, or my wheels might slip out. But yeah, despite the large wheels and the flexiness of the deck, riding over rough terrain just sort of felt unpleasant. Although it may have had to do with my preferred stance that I mentioned earlier, maybe if I shifted my stance around a bit, it could have helped. But since this is my very first hub motor board that I've ever owned, it could very well just be me not being used to hub motors, since all my other previous boards have been belt driven. Regardless, whenever I'm riding the Spadger, I usually try to stick to smooth pavement as much as possible because I'm less comfortable riding it over bumpy terrain or roads with a lot of pebbles. To clarify, riding over rough or rocky roads is still possible. If I do have to do that, I usually just slow down and take it easy. The last thing I do want to mention regarding ride experience is water resistance, because technically the Spadger board is rated for IP54 water resistance. I did run over a few puddles by accident here and there, but my board was usually fine. I would not suggest riding through this through extended periods of wet condition or rain though. That might end up ruining this board. So for a board that costs $470, should you buy the Spadger Board S900? I think it really depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something relatively cheap that you can ride around for fun, or to even commute to somewhere within around 7 to 8 miles that you can easily carry with you when you're not riding, this board could be for you. If you're also looking for something really flashy that you can show off to your friends, family, coworkers, and just people around you, yeah, this definitely is probably the one. The deck and lighting combination makes the Spadger stand out in this category specifically. This Spadger board would also be a pretty good option if you're looking to get a secondary board for maybe like a friend to ride with, since it is cheap and pretty easy to learn and get used to. However, there are also many reasons not to get the Spadger board. If you're very heavy, the flex of the deck could end up being a little bit too much for you. Or if the area around you is mostly rough terrain or absolutely littered with rocks and pebbles, the Spadger board can handle it, but it might not be like the most pleasant ride. If you want to do extremely long rides, the Spadger probably won't be able to handle it, or at least to what you expect. Like, you can't expect to drain the battery, then quickly charge your board at like a coffee shop and just keep going. The true range is short, you know, again, like around 6 to 8 miles, and it takes hours to charge. In the future, if Spadger does update this board, I'd like to see options with higher quality or longer range batteries. And while I do like the flex and durability of the deck, I think the deck could use just a little bit less flex, since it is actually flexier than the boosted board V2's deck, which I think is a good maximum point when it comes to deck flexiness on an electric board. The issue with pebbles and rough terrain could also be looked into and fixed, assuming that's not just my inexperience with hub motor boards. I will keep you updated in the comments below if my experience does improve over time with rough terrain. But that's basically it for my review. What do you guys think of this Spadger board? Let me know in the comments, and if you have any other questions about anything I might have missed, don't be afraid to ask me. I'm also going to leave links in the description for where you can buy the Spadger Board S900, along with some other relevant links. If you did enjoy this link, I'd appreciate if you left a like, and if you didn't, let me know why. If you want to see more of this, consider subscribing or follow me on Instagram. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Heat in my vein like vernacular. Cook up the beat with a spatula. Y'all are not ready for action. I'm smoking these rappers and feeling spectacular. Making a killing like massacre. Watch out, I'm whipping my wrist. Right on my city, been pissed, but I show them love. I'm not the one that's at risk. My homie told me that when people rise up against you, it's a sign of your destiny real. Fake ones been hating cause they know that one day